Have you ever watched someone walk into total chaos and somehow look like nothing is wrong? The deadline just got moved up, the flight got canceled, the room is yelling, and everyone else is spiraling, but this one person just breathes. They think and they respond instead of react. And it makes you wonder, is that just who they are? Or is something actually happening inside their mind that the rest of us don't have access to? Here's the strange part. It's not luck and it's not personality. It's a set of behaviors, quiet and repeatable and almost invisible, that calm people run automatically, often without even realizing they're doing it. And once you see them, you start noticing them everywhere. In your boss, in a friend, maybe even in a version of yourself you only meet on your best days. So let's name what's actually going on. Psychologists have a term for this: stress inoculation, a learned pattern where a person's nervous system has been trained through repetition and experience to interpret pressure as information instead of danger. Their body still reacts and heart rate still climbs a little, but the brain doesn't sound the full alarm. It treats the moment as solvable instead of threatening. And here's the part that matters for you. This isn't some rare trait reserved for surgeons or pilots or hostage negotiators. You've probably already felt a flicker of this yourself in some corner of your life where you've built enough experience that pressure doesn't scare you anymore. Maybe it's a skill at work. Maybe it's a conversation you've had 100 times. In that one area, you already know what calm feels like. You just haven't noticed that the same mechanism can be trained almost anywhere else. That's the real discovery here. Calm isn't a fixed personality type that some people are born with and others aren't. It shows up in specific, observable habits, in the way calm people move, speak, and act in the exact moment things go wrong. And once you can see those habits clearly, you can start borrowing them. So in this video, we're going to walk through 6 behaviors that calm people consistently show under pressure. The small, almost unconscious things they do differently from everyone else in the room. Some of these will be obvious the moment you hear them. Others are going to surprise you because they look nothing like what we usually picture when we imagine someone being calm. Stick around for all 6 because the last 2 are the ones that actually separate people who look calm from people who are calm. Let's start with the one that's easiest to spot from the outside. When pressure hits, most people's words speed up before they even notice it happening. Sentences get shorter, pitch rises, and the pace of speech starts to mirror the panic underneath it. Calm people do the opposite, and they do it on purpose, slowing their talking down, often within the first few seconds of a stressful moment. Here's why this works psychologically. Speech and breathing are tightly linked, so when you force your speech to slow down, you're also forced to take fuller breaths to support it, and that signals safety back to your nervous system. It's a feedback loop. Slower speech calms the body, and a calmer body makes it easier to keep speaking slowly. Calm people aren't faking composure when they talk slowly under stress. They're actually using their voice as a tool to regulate themselves in real time. Picture a pilot calmly relaying a problem to air traffic control, or a manager calmly saying, "Okay, let's figure this out," while a project falls apart around them. The voice doesn't rise, and the pace doesn't quicken. And strangely, that alone makes everyone else in the room breathe a little easier too, because the human nervous system is wired to read tone as a safety signal long before it processes the actual words being said. There's also a social ripple effect that most people never think about. When one calm voice enters a room full of rising panic, it tends to pull the whole group's pace down with it, almost like a tuning fork resetting everyone nearby. That's part of why calm people often end up being the ones others instinctively turn to during a crisis, even if they never asked for that role. Their voice becomes a kind of anchor point that other people's nervous systems borrow from, whether they realize it or not. which leads to the next behavior, because slowing down your voice is really just the most visible version of something calm people do internally, long before anyone else can hear it.
Most people respond to a stressful trigger almost instantly. Something goes wrong, and within a second, a reaction is already firing. A sharp word, a tense expression, an impulsive decision. Calm people build in a small gap, not minutes, just a few seconds of deliberate pause between the trigger and the response. This gap matters more than it seems. When a stressful event hits, the brain's threat detection center activates fast, often faster than conscious thought, but the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and planning is slower to come online. Those few seconds of pause are enough time for that slower, smarter part of the brain to catch up and take the wheel, instead of leaving the reaction entirely to instinct. Think about someone receiving genuinely bad news in a meeting. Everyone else gasps or jumps straight into blame, but the calm person pauses, just for a beat, before they speak. That pause isn't them being slow, it's them giving their reasoning brain enough time to load. This is sometimes called the gap between stimulus and response, and it's one of the most trainable skills in this entire list. The pause doesn't have to be dramatic or obvious to anyone watching. It can be as small as one slow exhale before responding to an angry email, or a single breath before answering a question you weren't ready for. What matters isn't the length of the pause, it's the fact that it exists at all, because that tiny gap is where choice lives. Without it, behavior is just reflex, and with it, behavior becomes a decision. Think about a customer service representative facing an irate caller. The untrained instinct is to defend yourself immediately, matching the caller's energy. The composed representative takes that same half-second pause, lets the first wave of the caller's frustration pass without absorbing it, and then responds from a place that's actually useful instead of defensive. But pausing only works if a person has somewhere productive to direct their attention during that gap, and that's exactly where the next behavior comes in. Under pressure, the natural question that surfaces in most people's minds is some version of, "Why is this happening to me?" or "How did this get so bad?" It's a reasonable question, but it's also a dead end, because it points backward at something that's already finished. Calm people ask a different question almost automatically. What is actually within my control in this exact moment? This shift has a name in psychology. It's related to what's called an internal locus of control, the belief that your actions can meaningfully influence outcomes, even partial ones. When a person's attention goes toward what they can control, their brain shifts out of a passive, victimized stance and into a problem-solving one. The emotional intensity doesn't necessarily disappear, but it stops being the only thing happening, because now there's a task alongside the feeling. Think of someone whose flight gets canceled minutes before boarding. The crowd around them is venting at the gate agent, but that one calm traveler is already on their phone rebooking, because their mind jumped straight to "what's my next move?" instead of staying stuck on "this is unfair." This doesn't mean calm people ignore the unfairness of a situation or pretend everything is fine. They simply don't let that question occupy the only available space in their mind. There's room for both the frustration and the next step, but the next step gets priority, because dwelling on the unfairness of a situation has never actually changed the situation itself. It only changes how long a person stays stuck inside it. Think also of a small business owner whose biggest client suddenly cancels a contract. The panicked version of that moment spirals into, "Why does this always happen to me?" while the composed version asks, "Who else could I reach out to this week, and what does my cash flow actually look like for the next 30 days? And once a person knows what they can control, the next behavior decides how they actually use that information, because controlling your focus isn't the same as controlling your story. When something stressful happens, most people's internal monologue centers on their emotional state. "I'm freaking out. This is a disaster. I can't handle this." Calm people run a different narration track. Instead of describing how they feel, they describe what's actually happening, almost like a reporter giving a factual update.
This distinction is more powerful than it sounds. Describing your feelings tends to amplify them because naming an emotion while you're in it can intensify your focus on that emotion. While describing the situation instead, the server is down, we have maybe 20 minutes before the client call, keeps the brain anchored to facts that can actually be acted on rather than feelings that just need to be felt. Picture an ER nurse during a chaotic shift. She isn't saying, "I'm so overwhelmed right now." She's saying, "Bed 4 needs vitals. Bed 7 is stable. I'll be back in 5. The facts replace the panic as the main thing being tracked. This habit also changes how a stressful event gets stored in memory afterwards. When someone narrates their feelings the whole way through a crisis, what they remember later tends to be the emotional chaos of the moment. But when someone narrates the facts instead, what they remember is closer to a sequence of solvable problems. Same event, two very different memories, and the second version is far easier to recover from once it's over. Think of a parent whose toddler goes missing for a terrifying few minutes in a crowded store. The instinct is to think something terrible is happening, but the composed parent, even while their heart is pounding, narrates instead, "He was by the cereal aisle 2 minutes ago. I'll check there first, then the entrance." The facts give the mind something solid to stand on while the fear runs in the background.
This kind of natural narration also tends to come with a particular physical signature, which brings us to a behavior that's a little more subtle than the first three. Watch someone under stress, and you'll usually see restlessness, fidgeting hands, shifting weight, a leg that won't stop bouncing, the body trying to discharge nervous energy. Calm people often do the opposite. Their stillness isn't stiffness or freezing. It's a kind of settled, grounded steadiness, as if their body has decided there's no immediate threat worth moving for. This connects to something called interoception, your brain's ongoing read of internal body signals like heart rate, muscle tension, and breath. When someone keeps their body still, they're sending a steady stream of "things are fine" signals back up to the brain. The body and the mind are in constant two-way communication, and a still body quietly tells the brain there's no emergency happening, even while a stressful situation continues around them. Think of a chess player deep into a high-stakes match, hands folded, barely moving, while the clock ticks down. That outward stillness isn't passivity, it's the visible result of an internal system that has decided not to panic. This is also why some of the calmest-looking people in high-pressure jobs train their stillness deliberately. Surgeons are taught to keep their hands steady and their posture relaxed, not just for precision, but because a tense body sends stress signals that can cloud judgment during exactly the moments that need the clearest thinking. The stillness isn't decoration, it's functional, feeding calm signals back into the very brain that has to make the next decision. Think of a parent staying outwardly composed while calmly talking a frightened child through a minor injury, even if their own pulse is racing underneath. The child reads the parent's stillness as proof that everything is going to be okay, and that read becomes self-fulfilling because a calm caregiver tends to produce a calmer child. But stillness alone wouldn't mean much if it disappeared the moment the pressure passed, which is exactly why the final behavior is the one that reveals whether someone's calm is genuine or just a temporary performance. This is the behavior most people get wrong about calm individuals. They assume calm people simply don't feel stress, that their heart rate never spikes, that nothing ever rattles them. That's not actually what's happening. Calm people absolutely feel the spike, and the real difference is how quickly they come back down afterward. This is the concept of physiological recovery time. Two people can have the exact same stress spike in the moment something goes wrong, but one person's nervous system returns to baseline in a few minutes, while another person stays activated for hours, replaying the moment over and over. The people we call calm aren't unshakable, they're just remarkably good at shaking it off quickly, through small recovery habits, a few slow breaths, a brief walk, a deliberate shift of attention that they've practiced so often they barely notice doing them anymore. Think of an athlete who misses an easy shot, looks frustrated for about 2 seconds, and then is fully back in the game, totally present for the next play. The miss happened, and the frustration happened. It just didn't get to stay. This is also why two people can go through the exact same hard week and come out of it in completely different states. The one who recovers quickly isn't necessarily tougher or less sensitive than the other person. They've simply built small, repeatable habits that signal the danger has passed back to their body, instead of letting the stress response run on its own indefinitely. Over time, this difference compounds because a nervous system that resets quickly is ready for the next challenge, while one that stays activated keeps fighting battles that already ended. Think of someone who gets a harsh piece of feedback at work, feels the sting immediately and honestly, and then by the next morning has already processed it and moved on to fixing what was actually said. Compare that to someone who replays the same comment for a week. The feedback was identical, but the recovery time was not, and that gap is often the real difference between people who seem to handle pressure well and people who genuinely do. So when you put all 6 of these together, a clearer picture starts to form. It was never really about somebody having no reaction at all. It's a slower voice, a few seconds of pause, a question aimed at what's controllable, a narration track focused on facts, a body that stays settled, and a nervous system that knows how to come back down quickly once the moment passes. None of these are personality traits you're stuck with. They're behaviors, which means they're things you can practice. So here's something worth sitting with for a second. Think back to the last time you were under real pressure. Which of these 6 did you already have, even just a little, and which one was completely missing? You might also think about someone in your life who handles stress this way, a parent, a coworker, a friend, and notice which of these 6 behaviors they actually use. If any of this hit close to home, send it to someone who needs to hear that calm isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And if this idea of training your mind under pressure resonated with you, there's a closely related pattern worth understanding next: the way some people's minds actually go quiet during a crisis instead of loud, almost like their thinking gets clearer the worse things get. That video breaks down exactly what's happening in the brain during that shift, and it builds directly on everything you just learned here, so keep an eye out for it right after this one ends. Before you go, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It genuinely means a lot. If this gave you a new way to think about pressure, do me a favor and tap that like button. It helps this video reach more people who need it. I'd love to know in the comments, which of these 6 behaviors do you already use without realizing it? Drop it below. I read every one. And if you want more videos like this, breaking down the psychology behind how people think, feel, and behave under pressure, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.